Hello, good evening from Singapore to everyone tuning in. A very warm welcome. If you can hear me loud and clear, appreciate that you type a hello in the chat box. You'll find that at the bottom right corner of the screen in the drop down, select to all panelists and attendees. Say hello and tell us where you're from.
Hello.
If you're joining us for the first time, hit 1. If this is not the first time you're joining our webinar, type 2. My name is Chai Lian and I'll be your host this evening. So we would love for you to continue to interact with us on the panel and with each other using this chat box throughout the webinar. You will also find at the bottom of the screen a Q&A function. So we'll encourage you to use this function when you're posting questions specific for our speaker. What makes a team? Putting people in a group doesn't make them a team. We know that building trust is hard enough at times, even for a group of people working in the same building. So can a team collaborate effectively to deliver a project completely remotely? Today's webinar is Virtual Team Management and Collaboration. It's brought to you by Project Management Association Singapore, PMAS, the PMAS Young Crew, which are members of the International Project Management Association, IPMA, together with our partner this evening, GBMC. On the panel with me, my co-host and co-moderator, Ting Wei, the IPMA, PMAS Young Crew. Ting Wei, say hi.
Hello, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
So tell us, how did you come to know our speaker this evening, and tell us a little bit about our speaker.
Sure, thanks Charlene for the warm introduction to our association and the topic for today's event. Before I begin, I'd like to extend my heartiest gratitude to Mr. Gavin O for his time to speak about today's topic. I actually know Gavin about 4 or 5 years ago, more as a business relationship at that time. And you know, Mr. Gavin is the managing partner and CEO of Global Business Management Consultants that specializes in training and consulting in the areas of project programs and portfolio management. And Mr. Gavin brings 20+ years of his own experience with us today. So thank you, Gavin, and I'll hand over the screen to you now to introduce yourself and GBMC before we go ahead with the conversation topic today.
Thank you very much, Ting Wei and Chai Ling, for that warm introductions. And thank you to all the participants who have signed into these webinars. I can see from the screen just now that many of you are from various different countries. So I don't know to say good evening or good morning or good afternoon. But anyway, welcome to this webinar session, which is going to last for roughly about an hour, plus another 15 minutes of Q&A after which. Okay, so let me first share my screen so that all of you are able to see my screen. So Ting Wei, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, so again, warm welcome to all of you to this 1 hour webinars with the title Virtual Team Management and Collaboration. As what Chai Lin has mentioned just now, team is more than just a group of people. Okay, as we get people together and work in a very collaborative environment, we need to make sure that we have good teamwork. And in today's context, especially with the COVID, many of us are forced to even work from home. Okay, so this thing about virtual team management becomes something even more apparent and more challenging. So today, since we only have 1 hour, I would like to spend some time to share some experience with you in terms of how can we go about managing virtual team better and encourage a stronger collaboration within the team. Okay, uh, so I suppose some of the marketing communication that was sent out by PMAS has already listed what are some of these learning outcomes. In this short 1 hour session, we hope that we can share with you what are some of the techniques of building trust, especially having a good trust helps with effective communication. And I think all of us understand that communication is something very, very essential. If we don't have effective communication, I think teams will start to break down. Okay. The second point is really about creating new normal for remote teamwork and working from home. So later on, I'll be differentiating a little bit about virtual team from working from home. I mean, before COVID, many of us, in fact, already work from home. Many of us have been so-called running a virtual team. But with the COVID, you find that more people are being forced to work from home. All right. So what are some of the challenges that you bring along with that? And how do we go about overcoming some of these challenges? The third point is about exploiting technologies so that we can better engage our team member, especially when they are working from home. And last but not least is to see how can we go about tapping opportunities of working with virtual teams. On one hand, I think there are a lot of challenges working with virtual team, but on the other hand, I think there are also some advantages, which we hope we can touch on in today's session. Okay. Now, feel free along the way, if you have any questions, as what Charlie has mentioned, just go ahead to type in the Q&A box, and then we will take some logical time break in between to try to entertain some of these questions and doubts that you have. So let me first by doing a quick introduction about my company, GBMC. This is an international consulting company that was set up in 1985. And for the last 35 years, the only thing we do is project management. So under project management umbrella, we cover things like consulting, training and coaching, and also helping organizations to improve their project management capabilities and competency. So in the last 35 years, we have grown to different corners of the world. So in this map, you can see that some cities are marked in red, like Houston, Brussels, Istanbul, and Singapore. So myself, I'm located in Singapore, which happens to be the headquarters for Asia Pacific. Houston is taking care of the American business. Brussels is our headquarters that take care of Europe countries, and Istanbul is covering the Middle East and South Africa. Okay, and for the last 30 plus years, we have worked with many Fortune 500 companies, and I'm sure many of these companies' logo on the screen is something that some of you are quite familiar with. Now, all I can say is in the last 22 years I was with this company, we are sensing or we are seeing that the project management market is ever growing. More and more organizations are working on bigger and bigger projects, more complex projects, and gone are the days whereby you can just simply use common sense to run projects. Okay, so in today's topics, which is about team, you will notice that in project management, in fact, we emphasize a lot on strong teamwork, because behind every successful project is always about having a good team, having a high performance team. So the challenge to us is if our team member had to work in the virtual environment or they have to work from home, how do we continue to be able to build a strong and high performance virtual team? Okay, so a bit of my background. I'm a Singaporean, born in 1963. I studied electrical engineering, and upon graduation, I started working with two multinational companies, AT&T, Bell Labs, and Motorola, for about 11 years. So I was looking at various different kind of projects ranging from R&D, circuit design, simulations. And when I moved to Motorola, I started to get involved in sales and marketing, product development, as well as strategic planning. So I left them in 1998. And for the last 22 years, have been with this company, GBMC. And currently I'm the CEO of the company, managing a team of about 40 consultants that is spanning across the different parts of the world. So basically, I'm managing a virtual team too. All right. In terms of hobby, I like any sports that do with water, like fishing, swimming, snorkeling, canoeing. All right. And I just put up a simple QR code there. In fact, at the end of the presentation, I also leave behind my contact details so that in future, if you still need any help or any clarification about the topics we present today, feel free to get in touch with me. Okay. All right. So let's quickly get on to the seminar proper, okay? And because this is a virtual seminar, all right, So I would like to start by engaging you by asking you to take out your mobile phone and scan the QR code on the screen. And immediately you'll be asked 3 questions on this platform called Mentimeter. All right, and there are 3 questions there whereby you can answer from a scale of 1 to 5. So let me switch over to the other screen here, which is on this Mentimeter. Okay, and as participants start to respond to this question, I hope you have scanned in. If not, I can just call up the QR code again. You can quickly scan the QR code that is shown on the screen. Or if not, you can key in the web link, www.menti.com, and then key in this 7-digit number, 5378272. All right, and that will lead you to these 3 questions which I just asked. Question 1 is, how have you managed virtual team before? Okay, you can put 1 on the left and 5 on the right. And the second question is, do you prefer to manage virtual team to physical team? So some of you have experience managing physical teams, some of you have experience managing virtual team, or a hybrid of both. So what is your preference? All right, if you score on the left, that means you do not prefer, strongly no. But if you put on the right, that means it's strongly yes, you enjoy managing virtual team. All right, and the last question is, do you foresee your organization is getting more virtual going forward? So this year is 2020. Let's look at the next 2-3 years. Do you foresee that your company, your organization is getting more virtual? Okay. All right. So on the bottom right of the screen, you can see that we have so far 8 respondents. That is still a low number since I understand just now from Ting Wei and Charlene, we are probably close to 50 people who have enrolled. So how many people are there right now who have signed in, Ting Wei?
We have about 24.
We have 24. Okay, so I hope to see a number that is more than 20. So those of you who still have not scanned in, let me just call up the QR code again. You can continue to scan in.
I've also put it in the chat so people can
Okay,
refer
thank you
to
very
it.
much. And I don't believe nowadays people can give the excuse to say they don't have a mobile phone, right? Okay, so it's a very simple exercise here, just to get you warm up. So take out the phone, scan the QR code, and then let's see how many people have responded. 12. Okay. So you can continue to do that. And at least based on the 12 respondents so far, I can see that there are quite a number of you, probably close to 70-80% of you have experienced managing virtual team before. Okay, the only question I did not ask you is in what capacity are you managing that? Okay, because my relationship with PMES is mainly on projects. And for those of you who have been running projects, especially in the capacity of the project manager, you'll notice that your team, so-called your project team, although they are your team, but they are not really your team. All right. In fact, many of your team members have their direct bosses. So first, in the project environment, you find that managing team itself is a challenge, not to even talk about managing virtual team. All right. So that's why you will notice later on in the presentation, we are going to highlight to you that there are some challenges that we experience in managing team that will get carried over as we manage virtual team. So if you can't even manage your team well, you can simply forget about managing virtual team because it's an added dimension of complexity and added dimension of challenges. Okay, so at least I'm glad to see that at least a good 70-80% of you have been managing virtual team. Now, in terms of preference of managing virtual team or physical team, all right, I can see that the score here is about 3.8, so it's more than 50%. So good, at least in terms of the mindset, I'm really glad that not many of you are having this, what they call negative mindset, that virtual team is a chaos, virtual team is a nightmare, all right? I think especially if you are a leader for the virtual team, you have to first and foremost have the right mindset. You have to start looking into what are some of the positive aspects that we can leverage on, or what are some of the positive impact that we can leverage upon so they can make the virtual team works better, okay? And last but not least, I think we are all in great agreement. The world is getting more virtual. We are more and more of a network organization. So we hope, at least in today's session, I won't say that you will straight away become a master in managing virtual team, but at least you want to create some awareness, okay, in terms of what are some of the things to focus on and to look out for. so that it become a continuous journey. I'm sure PMES will be organizing a lot more of this kind of webinars to enhance or improve your skills in leadership, in managing team. But at least I think we all need to be aware that the world is getting more and more virtual. All right. Just as much we love to work with people, in a close proximity, but nevertheless, since the world is getting more virtual, I think it is a very important skills for us to pick up. All right. How do we manage virtual team going forward? Okay. So thank you very much for the response. And I'm just going to switch back to the presentation again. All right. So as I mentioned earlier on, the fact that many of you has been managing team, especially physical team of people who are co-located with you, team of people that is very close to you, all right, you'll find that there are some of these common team management challenges that be carried over to the team management. Okay, by the way, this is just a comics that is from a local newspaper. So for those of you who are from overseas, you might not know some of these characters, but it's okay. Basically, this is just a simple comic strips that talk about video conferencing. As many of you know, especially with the COVID in fact affecting us, many of us have started to work from home. So there was this gentleman here, his name is actually Chu, all right? So his wife was asking him, he said, dear, how is it coming along when your office is now moved on to work from home? And this guy said that, well, looks like everything is the same. Why? Because his colleagues are still not punctual as usual. So even when they are calling for Zoom meeting, you'll notice that he is the only one that is present. So you have to wait for others to show up. Okay. So this, as I said, basically about time management. So in a normal teams environment, if we can't even manage time well, by moving to virtual team is going to be even a bigger challenge for you to deal with, because people are all vastly so-called located in different locations. All right, and especially with time zone difference, it's going to make it even more challenging. So perhaps I would like to quickly put down a list of what are some of the common challenges that we face day in and day out as we manage team. All right, so I'll really encourage all of you, all right, to at least have a good foundation of making your team work before we even talk about virtual team and people working from home. So things like lack of common objectives is one of the big problems in having a good teamwork. As what Charlene has mentioned just now, first, to qualify as a team, it is more than just a group of people. Okay, you need to make sure that everyone in the team are aligned. They have some kind of common goal. If your team does not have a common goal, it is not even qualified as a team to start off with. Okay, in the team, we need to have a clear roles and responsibility. Without clear roles and responsibility, you will create all kinds of conflicts that you can imagine. Okay, when you don't have a clear expectation in the team, sometimes you find that this itself can create a lot of ill feeling in the team. People thought they are doing a good job, but you think they are not doing a good job. Okay, lack of trust. So I think Charlene earlier also touched on this very important point. Trust is very important, and you'll notice that in a while, as I talk about more about on the virtual team, you'll find that that is one of the key points I'm going to highlight. Because when people are not working together without the trust, it's even harder to work as a team. Okay, now point number 5 is really talking about ineffective communication. Now, I sometimes like to describe communication or effective communication is like the oxygen in the air. If we don't have effective communication, it's like we'll be suffocating. Okay, so I'm sure some of you probably has worked in the environment whereby communication are not effective. You have all kind of meeting, you have frequent meeting, and then people talk and talk. In fact, I have one customer, just to share with you a very interesting experience here. They have what they call the alignment meeting, which I think all of you know what that is. Interesting enough, this company, before they have the alignment meeting, they have a pre-alignment meeting. After the alignment meeting, they have a post-alignment meeting. So you can imagine how many alignment they have to go through. So this is a classical case sometimes whereby if we don't manage communication well, that can actually eat up a lot of our time and we are becoming less and less productive. So if any of you happen to have gone for a time management training, they'll probably tell you meeting is probably the biggest time robber in terms of time management. Okay. Now to continue with the list, sometimes we have misalignment of KPI, especially for big organization. Every one of us are from different departments or different functional group. We have our own KPI. And guess what? In today's world, we are more and more required to work cross-functionally. So that is, in our opinion, one of the things that sometimes make the team to fall apart, because people are all being misaligned due to the way they are being measured in their respective department. So we call that, we form a lot of silos. Okay, and then poor time management. I think this is going to affect the team effectiveness. Okay, no self-discipline, or when people are not motivated, they lack of commitment and unwillingness to collaborate. So these are just some observations that we have made, even in a physical team. If all these points that was on the screen are not well managed, likelihood you will not have a good team. Not to even talk about how to get the team work in the virtual environment. Okay, all right. So the next question I have for all of you then is that, how is managing virtual team different from managing a physical team? Which I think from the survey just now, many of you say that you have managed virtual team before. Okay, so if I assume that you have managed both virtual team and physical team before, I'm pretty sure that you have some past experience to share. What are some of the common challenges in managing virtual teams? Okay, so again, I'm just going to switch over to another question to ask you. Okay, so same thing, you can take out your mobile phone. It's the same QR code. So let me call up the Mentimeter again. Okay, so you can scan in the same QR code or key in the same the 7-digit code. And then this question is basically asking you again to share with me what are some of the common challenges that you have experienced in managing virtual team. So each of you are allowed to have maximum 5 inputs. We are not going to take too much time on this. Chidin, are you seeing the Mentimeter on this question? Common challenge in managing virtual team. Okay. So this is what we call the word crowd. So depending on the responses from the participants, those common responses, you'll find that the wording will become bigger. Okay. So far there are 2 respondents. The very moment you press enter, the data will be collated on the screen. So all of you can see on the fly what are some of the responses from the different participants. So trust is right now one of the bigger one.
We can consider the time zone and difference in time zone to be same. Yeah.
Yep. I'm really glad all you are very open in sharing your challenges, because this will be some of the points that we'll be touching on in a while. I just want to make sure that your experience is quite similar to mine in terms of managing virtual team. Okay, a few key ones will be things like motivation, trust, communication. Okay, I think time zone occurs a few times, maybe in the different words. And some of you talking about misaligned goals. I saw one very interesting one saying that we are not able to read body language. Some of you highlighted some technical difficulties like connectivities, okay, as well as camera off. Now, whoever is the one that put camera off, I'm probably going to tap into your experience in your respective organization or in your respective company. What is a practice? Are people advised to have camera on or camera off? Because this, on one hand, help us with the challenge that one of you talked about just now about not able to see body language. In fact, in today's technology, we are all able to have a webcam on the laptop. Like now you can see Ting Wei, Chailin, and myself. You can see my body language, all right? But having said that, at least for my last many years of experience, even before COVID, as we have a lot of this kind of meetings, we find that most of the time people shy from turning the camera on. And when you ask them why are they not turning camera on, they say they give you all kind of excuses. All right. So we'll talk about that in a while. Okay. So we have 13 respondents again, and I think the few words that is bigger are things like communication, trust, motivation, empathy, and maybe some of these technical problems we just talked about earlier on. Okay, again, thank you very much for sharing with me your experience. So let me get back to the PowerPoint again. All right. So we already talked about just now what are some of the common challenge in managing team. So now we want to move on from team management to virtual team. Okay. So as I said, this is an added dimension of complexity. So this will be a recommended list of factors that we would like all of you to focus more as you manage virtual team. All right. The first one is really about effective communication. And because your team are in the virtual environment, so you find that strengthening of the trust become very important. I put a bracket there, OT. I'm not sure all of you know what OT stands for, because in one class when I asked what is OT, they tell me overtime. Now, overtime will not help with strengthening of trust. Okay, but this OT stands for being open and being transparent. Okay, because we are talking about communication with virtual team. And one thing we find is that if we are not open and transparent, that itself is not allowing us to build trust. I've observed in many team environments when people are very, when they are not willing to share information, or when they are keeping information to themselves, guess what? You are creating a lot of mistrust. You are making people to second guess what is happening. I'm not sure today, did any of you happens to watch the debate among the potential vice presidents in America, whereby they are asking all these questions and they sort of skirt around and then not answering the question directly. And immediately after that, so-called debate, you find that all the news channel will start to guess what they are trying to do. Okay, so if there's one thing I'd like you to remember in tonight's webinars, it's really about the importance of building trust. Because when we have a strong trust, that helps us to resolve many challenges, of which one of them, the most important one, is about making communication effective. Okay. Second point here is really about influencing and motivating team, which I think many of you just now has also highlighted that point. When people are working in the virtual environment, why is motivation a bigger challenge? Well, for a very simple reason, because they are far from you. Okay, you are not able to get in touch with them that frequently. All right. So what it means then is that you have to think of ways and means how to influence and motivate them even more. Okay. The point number 3 is, as we manage virtual team, it is very important to be sensitive and at the same time to be positive. Now, I use the word positive because although virtual team come with a lot of challenges, but it also comes with a lot of benefits. So as a leader, when you are managing the virtual team, I think first thing first is you yourself has to be positive, because when you become very negative, likelihood that will carries to the team. You're going to create a lot of negative energy within your team. So you have to be positive. You have to start looking at the bright spots, so to speak, and try to identify what are some of the things that can work well in a virtual environment. So those are the points that we'll be touching on in a while. Okay. Another challenge which surprisingly did not quite show up in the earlier survey just now, because many of our clients, at least in the last 7 or 8 months when they are being asked to work from home or not going to the office, they find that one challenge they have is that people are starting to be maybe not as goal-oriented or goal-achieving as when they are working in the office environment. Okay, and worse still, there are a lot of people who start to give a lot of excuses why the goal cannot be met. Okay, because of some of these shortcoming or some of these lack of equipment or lack of the kind of efficiencies that the office environment provide. Okay, so that is also something that I'll encourage all of you as you are managing virtual team. You need to keep reinforcing the importance of the goals. All right, setting some expectation. Okay, on one hand, you need to be quite demanding, but on the other hand, you need to be quite sensitive. Okay, of course, that's easier said than done, but that is something that you need to really work on it. Okay, all right. The next point here is about engaging people and encourage participants. I think that is one of the bullet points that was shown just now. As you work in the virtual team, I think many of you experience, typically in the office environment, when you have a meeting, likelihood a lot of people will be quite engaging, quite participative. But when you come to virtual meeting, for example, because many a time only 2 persons can talk. Isn't that true? So it makes people, many of them, to become like a backbencher. Even they want to talk, they feel like if they were to talk, they are going to interrupt the discussion. So many of them might choose to stay silent or not expressing themselves. So slowly you find that people start to be sort of disengaged from the meeting. So you need to watch out for that. You must start thinking of ways and means how to encourage them to participate. So later on, we're going to share with you what are some of the maybe tools they can consider using to help to engage your team, even though they are working in the virtual environment. Okay. Number 6 is leveraging on tools for interaction and brainstorming. I just talked about that. And number 7 is be flexible, especially when your virtual team of people are spanning across different time zone and different location. Sometimes you find that it is always very hard to find a common time, okay, or common place for people to meet, to discuss. So we have to kind of be creative in terms of how to make these different time zones to sometimes even work to our advantage. Just give you a very simple example. When I was working in AT&T, it was more than 30 years ago. So it happens that for about 1 year, I was managing what we call an international project with my team member. Some are from Asia Pacific, some are from America, and some are from Europe. Okay, typically, if you only have 2 continents, you can still find a common time for meeting. But you have team member from spanning across 3 continents, you find that it's always a challenge to find a good time, so to speak. But I still remember in those years, because our headquarters is in US, we always call America as the big brother, so to speak. So many of the time, the conference call is always held around like midnight Asia time, 12 midnight, which is about the end of the day for Europe and the beginning of the day for US. By the time whereby Asia Pac people is about to sleep. So at that point of time, many of my team members in Asia Pac wasn't very happy about that, because most of the time this conference call will last for at least 1 to 2 hours. So you can imagine by the time it's finished, it's almost at 2 a.m. in the morning. And worse still, the next day, you are still expected to sign into the office at 9 o'clock. So you can imagine the kind of frustration sometimes the team member might have. So if you don't manage things, this aspect well, sometimes you can create a lot of unnecessary tension as well as maybe unhappiness in your team. Okay, and then I mentioned earlier on, because of all these different KPI, we are all from different departments. So sometimes we have this what we call the silos mindset. So one of the very important thing about managing virtual team, especially they are coming from different departments, is that you have to constantly do alignment with them. Okay, maybe I'll use the word brainwashing. For those of you who have been in project management, you probably heard about what is called stakeholders management. Okay, so what exactly is stakeholders management? It's really about aligning people, so that we want to make sure that people are on the same page, people have a common goal. Okay, and then for point number 9 is really talking about understand the resource constraint, especially in this environment. People sometimes might not be having the same kind of support that they have as compared to when they are in the office. So we need to know how to work around some of these constraints. And last but not least, how to learn to manage diversity. Okay, I suppose some of you in your company, in your industry, you have to work with people from different walks of life. Now, as I talk about the word diversity, it's not just about cultural diversity. Today, the word diversity could also mean things like age diversity, things like gender diversity, things like personality diversity. Okay, so in manage virtual team, you'll find that this thing about managing diversity is even more crucial. Okay, so very often we find that those successful team is one whereby they know how to recognize the differences of people and try to make the best out of it. Okay, so today I might not have time to go too deep into diversity, but if there's only one message I want to leave with you about diversity, you have to look at diversity as an advantage and not as a shortcoming. On one hand, diversity can create a lot of unnecessary conflict. On the other hand, if you know how to manage diversity well, that's where you can tap into the synergies of the differences that is brought along through diversity. Okay, so if you look at point 1 to 10, at the end of the day, it is really about driving performance, driving high performance for the virtual team. So always keep that in mind. As a leader, as a manager, managing virtual team, your objective, your goals is not other to make sure that your team perform well, even in the virtual environment. Okay. Now I want to transit a little bit from virtual team to working from home. Okay, because as I mentioned, this COVID-19, in fact, make a lot of us to work from home. Okay, just like Ting Wei said, in fact, as a consultant for the last 22 years with this company, GBMC, I've been working from home. I don't have a physical office. My home is my home office. So if you talk about working from home, it is really nothing new to people like myself or Ting Wei, plus many of you that's in the call. Okay. However, as a trainer, although I have a home office, but when I conduct training, I still go to companies' meeting rooms or training room to conduct training. We sometimes use hotel. Okay. But in the COVID, guess what? Everything is done from home. So I sometimes have to even deliver like half a morning or half an afternoon kind of a virtual training. And that is sometimes creating a lot of inconveniences for my family member, whereby we are all sharing the same premises. Because during the lockdown period, my kids who is now studying university is also studying from home. Okay, if you can imagine, if my family, my parents were to watch, let's say the drama, okay, during the daytime, then we are competing for some of these physical space. So we have to learn how to kind of, again, work from home so that it does not create unnecessary challenge as we run our team. Okay, so here I would like to pose you a questions. I list down 9 points over here. I show you all together. I'd like you to quickly look down at this list and determine for yourself, is working from home on these 9 points below, are they more positive or are they more negative? Or is it both? For example, there are some people who say working from home, how has it affected us? It creates a lot of distraction, a lot of interference. Okay, you can see right now at the back of my this Zoom meeting, I'm using a virtual background. You know I'm using a virtual background because my family is quite big, all right, and I'm now making this call from the hall. Maybe I'm not as fortunate as some people, but you have a room to yourself. You can, create having a very private call, so to speak. Okay, so by having a virtual background, at least if my family member to walk behind me, it does not create any kind of distraction. Okay, unfortunately, not all this kind of platforms for video conferencing can use virtual background. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I was running a training for a company and they were using Adobe Connect. All right. 1 month ago, they were using WebEx. Apparently for these two platforms, they don't quite allow virtual background. So as a trainer, you can imagine you have your family member walking behind you, it can be quite a disturbance as well as distraction. Now, having said that, is working from home on this point on distraction and interference, can it be a plus point? If you have any feedback, you can always key into the chat window or the Q&A window. How many of you feel that working from home, some of these distraction and interference could be a plus point? Some of you probably will be scratching your head. How could distraction and interference be a plus point, right? Okay, so in fact, in one of the virtual training that we conducted also on the same topics about managing virtual team, one of the participants said that when he was working in the office, he is not able to turn on the TV to look at the stock market. But when he's working from home, he's able to do that. And he's able to do some trading. And because of that, he make a few $100 here and there during the working from home period. So to him, he will think that that's a plus point. Because in the office, he will to do that, probably his boss will scold him. All right. So of course, I'm not encouraging you to do that, but I'm saying that there are some people who look at this as something that is a plus point. In fact, there are some participants who also feel that when you work from home, you are able to do multitasking. Now, is that good or bad? I don't want to comment right now. But as compared to working in office, sometimes you are only allowed to do one thing. But sometimes when you are working from home, you can have a bit more flexibility. I even had one participant who told me that in the last 9 months of circuit breaker, he managed to lose 9 kilograms. Because when he's working from home, every 2 hours, he can just go to the gym and do a 15 minutes workout. Okay. All right. So point number 2, work-life balance. Again, it can be plus and minus. Isn't that true? There are some people who enjoy this kind of flexi work hour. You don't have to rush in the peak hours, squeeze with people in the trains. You can still kind of work from home. You can sleep until 8 o'clock, wake up, and you are still ahead of time. The 9 o'clock of official start time of the day. Okay. Now, so going down this list, I don't want to go through one by one, but you can see that actually each of these has plus and minus. So what I would like you to do is to really encourage you to, again, stay positive, be positive, look at each of these points. If you look at this point from a positive perspective, likelihood there'll be a lot of things you can go about leveraging upon. Remember just now we were talking about motivation. In fact, in Singapore, I'm not sure about other countries that you are from, but at least in Singapore, I think there were some survey groups that actually went around surveying after people were being asked to stay at home to work for the last 6 months or so. They want to find out, are people happier working from home, or are they happier going back to office? And to my surprise, in fact, the result turned out to be about 50-50. Meaning to say there are 50% of the people who actually, after this experience, the last 6 months working from home, they truly enjoy working from home. When you ask them to go back to office now, many of them say, I prefer to work from home. Okay. So again, if all of us agree that going forward, our organization is going to become more and more virtual, then I would like to encourage you to go down this list and see what are the things you can go about doing to tap into the plus, the positive points, so that we can all use that as a kind of motivation factor, so to speak. But of course, I'm not saying that everyone will look at all this as a plus point. Of course, there are some people who think that working from home is creating a lot of inconvenience for the family member, and they can't wait to go back to the office to work. So all I can say is that different individuals are different. That's again where diversity comes in. Okay, and you have to then figure out what is the best thing to do in managing the virtual team. Okay, the last point is kind of interesting. You'll be surprised, in the last 7 or 8 months, there are many organizations whereby the workforce are being asked to work from home. So their office space has been left vacant for 6 to 7 months. And many of the company now, especially those whose lease is already up, they are thinking of not renewing anymore. And to the organization standpoint, that can be a huge saving in terms of office rental. Okay, now, so even before COVID, I still remember when I was still in Motorola, for the last 2 years that I was in Motorola, the company also started this initiative, wanting those people who need not work or spend time in the office to work from home. So the company actually give us allowance to work from home. But instead, the company is able to close down 3 floors, 3 stories of the office space. So you can imagine the kind of saving the company have. And that saving, some of them, they actually give it to the staff to encourage them to work from home, so to speak. Okay, so it becomes a win-win situation for both the organization as well as for the employee. Okay, all right. So I'll just take a break here, and maybe Charlene and Tingwei, can you let me know if there's any question being posed on the Q&A? Because I promise that I'll take a break every now and then so that we can get some of the urgent questions to be addressed immediately. Is there any questions so far?
We have comments from, so Carol said earlier on that open and transparency are essential at any working situation. So she said, thank you for highlighting that. Mm-hmm. And Madden commented that trust deficit can lead to disruption in the team.
I fully agree with the 2 comments that was posted. So that is why even before we talk about virtual team or working from home, I think this thing about building trust as well as being open and transparent should be a common practice. All right, just that you need to even practice more if you are running a virtual team. All
so
right,
the
thank you very much.
Follow-up question then is, Gavin, what tips do you give to teams or companies that come to you for advice about creating this environment of psychological safety where people feel comfortable enough or trusting enough to have the courage to give and receive feedback, for example, because clearly effective communication is so pivotal, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that this question is being posed, because later on, in fact, I do have one page that sort of summarize some of these recommendations. But since the question is asked, I do not want to keep the cat in the bag, so to speak. All right. If I may just at least give you a very simple recommendation, I would say that it has to start with you. You have to start with you. In a while, I'm going to talk about leading virtual team. So as a leader, as you lead a team, you find that leadership is not defined as how good or how great or how smart you are. Okay, leadership is really about how you can go about transforming the team of people that you lead into a high performance team. Today, we are very smart, very intelligent, very capable, but your team is terrible. You still couldn't qualify to be a good leader. Okay? So in order to lead your team, in order to influence them, in order to motivate them, I think first thing first is you have to learn how to lead yourself. Just to give a very simple example. If we say that you want your team to be committed, but you yourself are not committed, then it's very, very hard to ask people to be committed. Isn't that true? If you want your team member to be punctual in all meetings, but you are always the one that is being late, forget about asking your team to be punctual. So for the same argument, if you want to build trust in your team, or if you want to be open and transparent with your team, if you yourself are not open and transparent with your team, it is in fact near to impossible to ask your team member to be open and transparent to you. So it is a two-way traffic, so to speak. Okay, so I know that might not be a satisfactory answer, but I always like to tell people, especially if you've gone for change management training, they'll tell you change start with you. Change start with the person who is standing in front of the mirror. All right, because we find that for good leadership, you must learn how to lead yourself first before you can lead others. For good manager, you must learn how to manage yourself first before you can manage others. Okay, in fact, you can ask yourself, you can even challenge yourself. Just as we say, virtual environment is such a challenging environment to manage. Ask yourself, in the last 7 or 8 months during this, what they call COVID lockdown period, what are some of the things that you have achieved or accomplished? Because if you yourself cannot even achieve or accomplish anything, how can you expect your team member to achieve or accomplish anything? Okay. Now, for me, again, I might say that I'm quite a positive person. I like to look at things very positively. You know, especially for my kind of job as a training consultant, you know, in the last 6-7 months, this COVID thing is really creating a nightmare because for almost half a year, a lot of companies are putting all the training on hold because they cannot allow people to come for the training. You can have this face-to-face. Even virtual training is not on a high priority because every company is now talking about survival issue. So every time when that happens, training is always put at the back burner, so to speak. Okay. So I asked myself, so in the last 6 months, what is a good thing I can do? Of course, on one hand, I still want the business to be blooming. But on the other hand, I said, this is a golden opportunity for me to do something that I have all along wanted to do, but do not have time to do, which is to stay healthy. So for the last 6 months, in fact, I have made a point. I set a target. I have sort of, I must say that I'm quite pleased with my performance because I give myself a goal. Every month, I will reduce 1 kg. In fact, now I'm exceeding the goal. I've lost 10 kgs since January this year. Okay.
Wow.
So Tingwei, maybe you have not noticed that because you are not meeting face to face. But when you have a chance to meet face to face, you probably see how much slimmer I am right now. So
Well
this is
done.
this is
Well
again
done.
back to what I said earlier on. You must learn how to manage yourself first, because if you don't know how to manage yourself, it's very, very hard to manage others. Okay. So for those of you who are keen on how to lose weight by not paying a lot of money to gym instructor, you can message me after the call.
So we can say it's be the change you want to see in
Yes,
a way.
yes. To a great extent, that is the case. So as I said, you know, sometimes it's not really about having a silver bullets or a magic portions that you can just, you know, use it and then things will become better. I think it is a journey, so to speak, but it must start with you. All right. So as I said, working from home is not a new concept. Okay, so it's really about how do we go about leveraging on the positive and how do we go about managing ourselves as well as others in the environment. But start with yourself first. Okay, all right. So
Sorry, Gavin.
yes,
Before we move on, we have a question from Rachel, who's before COVID, the team is normally in office all the
yep,
time.
yes.
And she's asking, you know, do you have any tips on how to improve communication within virtual teams now that they've gone virtual? So it's quite a big change for the team.
Right.
And she's asking for some tips.
Okay, so you can just maybe hold on that question just for a while because I think in the next 2 or 3 slides, you'll start to see some suggestion. All right. And then again, we have a Q&A session at the end of the session. So in case I did not answer your question directly, feel free to chip in during the Q&A sessions towards the end of the webinars. Okay. All right. So before I even touch on all those things, I must say that the word virtual team to different people, it means different thing. So I would like to give you a broader sense of what virtual team is being defined in our context here. Because a lot of people thought virtual team means people that are in different country or different time zone. But in our opinion, actually virtual team can be quite a broad categories of situations, including, for example, people who work from home, work from hotel, work from coffee shop. People like myself, in fact, I spend many of my hours in airport lounge. And in fact, while waiting for the airplane, I sometimes even conduct meetings while I'm in airport lounge. So I'm a virtual team, so to speak. Okay, people who work in different countries, sites, and time zone. I think that one is obvious. Everybody knows about that. It could be people who work on part-time or shift. So long as they are not co-located, they can be called a virtual team. I have one client in Singapore, quite a big client. So they have a building about 7th floor. When they conduct meeting, even though it's the same time zone, same country, same building, but people dial in from their respective cubicles. So they are a virtual team. So not necessarily virtual team must be people of different culture or different time zones. Okay. Then a virtual team could also be people who work for multiple bosses, especially in the project context. We have to experience of working with a lot of virtual teams, including sometimes our supplier, sometimes our customer. They could be working in a totally different locations. Okay. So as what just now I think Rachel was saying is that how do we get people to come together, especially in the virtual environment, to still be able to communicate well? Okay, that I fully agree is a challenge. So question is, how do we go about addressing that challenge? Yeah? So virtual team is also described as people who are network, who are temporary. For those of you who understand project management, I think that's what we define project team as. It's always something temporary. When you first start the project, you put people together. When the project ended, you dismantle the team. And then you move on to another new project, another new team of people. So for people like Rachel, for example, in fact, you have a benefits, you have an advantage over there. All right. If you are saying that before COVID, you are working with the same team of people, during COVID, even though they are working from home, but at least you have the so-called past connection with these people. You have the past relationship established with these people. In project environment, sometimes you find that when you are really leading a virtual team, sometimes you don't even have a chance to have a face-to-face meeting with these people. Not to even talk about building a good relationship with these people. So everything starts from zero. Everything starts from scratch. So for those of you whereby your team already previously have been working together, tell yourself you have this what they call you are actually a step ahead compared to a pure virtual team that start from ground zero. Okay, all right. So the challenge is really about our ability to manage diversity well and to also reduce the conflicts and to create some competitive advantage and innovation in our organization. So how do we make diversity work become a key challenge to many of us who run virtual teams? Okay, so for virtual team collaboration, so hopefully this will start to answer some of the queries that some of you already have. I would like to offer you this very simple model, which I call it a PPT model. Why is it called PPT? It's not PowerPoint, but it's referring to people, the first P, the second P, process, and the third T, the third letter T as technology. So it's very easy model to remember. Just remember PPT. All right. In each of these circles, there are something that I'll maybe give you as a hints and tips in terms of what you should be focusing on in these three areas. Because it's only when you are able to combine these three together, that's how you actually get into what we call the high performance virtual team. And so as a leader, as a manager, that is your ultimate goal, how to create this high performance team in a virtual environment. So you must know how to work on these three different aspects with people, which really focus on the attitude, the mindset, the behavior, the trust, and the diversity we have been talking all along. Let's talk about the process, especially in the virtual environment. More so, you need to have some kind of ways and means to share information. All right. You need to have some processes, like for example, every time as we meet, what kind of template to use, what kind of color code it means. All right. What kind of, I suppose some of you probably heard of what is called a meeting cadence. Okay. In the virtual team environment, especially during this period of COVID, you find that when people all start working from home, you don't have any kind of routines or cadence, then you find that it's very, very hard to find a good time or a right time to get everybody together. So first thing first is you need to set up some of this rhythm going on. So I'm going to touch on this process in a while's time. And last but not least is how do you go about leveraging on technology so that hopefully this technology will make people to be more productive. It will improve their collaboration as well as the communication. So some of us are quite new to some of this technology. Even Zoom, you cannot assume everybody know how to use Zoom. It also took me a while to really familiar with all the different buttons and all the different menus under Zoom. Okay, but there are a lot more collaborative tools that we can go about using. So just 1 month ago, we were actually doing a virtual training in doing agile project management, and then we are using this tool called Miros, whereby you have all these post-it pad that you can all move around, and then people can all come together, chip in their concept, chip in their ideas. I find that that's a fantastic tool as a replacement of face-to-face. Okay. Another very interesting tools as we go about doing all this estimation. In fact, nowadays there are a lot of websites whereby you can do this kind of poker game using a virtual way. All right. So I think that is the only limit I would say is your creativity. You can have creativity, you are innovative enough, you don't mind keeping an open mind. There are in fact many of these tools you can go about using to leverage upon. Okay. So let's now zoom into this PPT. All right, and hopefully I will be able to give you some pointers, some hints in each of these areas. Okay, so let's start with understanding your role as a leader, as a manager, when you are managing virtual team. So organization success is always depending on people, leadership, as well as effective teamwork. Okay, just having people alone without good leadership, you can't be successful. Just having good leadership but no effective teamwork, you can't be successful. So if you are able to put this together, then these are 5 areas I like you to focus on. Okay, the first one, I think many of us has already talked about how to build trust. Okay, all you can say is only when there's a trust, you can have a high performance team. Okay, I don't know about you, but if I can share with you my experience, I've led many project teams before. Some team is a chaos, but some team works very well. And when I look behind those project teams that works very well, likelihood, we have built strong trust. People are able to be open and transparent, and we are able to communicate with no fear. Okay, so later on, I'm going to give you some hints and tips how to build trust. Okay, so just bear with me for a while. Now, as a high performance team, a lot of people always thought high performance team, that means people are very nice to one another, people don't quarrel. Actually, it's not true. I work with a lot of high performance team whereby within the team, people sometimes argue, people sometimes debate, they even shout at one another. But the good things about that is all this conflict will be able to be resolved amicably. All right, we can have differences, but at the end of the day, we are all able to reach a consensus, meaning to say people can agree to the disagreement. So you need a lot of what you call empathy. You need a lot of conflict resolution skills, so to speak. All right. So the question then is, the more we are able to manage conflict, actually, when we're able to come out of this conflict, you actually have a stronger team. So don't look at conflict as something bad. Look at conflict as an opportunity for you to bring the team closer together. Okay. So as a leader, you must constantly make sure that you want your team to have commitment, to take ownership. Again, that starts with you. All right. But one of the tips we're going to leave with you here is that one of the very easy way to achieve ownership and commitment is to get your team involved. Although you carry the title as a leader, as a manager, but that does not mean that you need to decide everything for your team. In fact, on the contrary, we find that the more you are able to engage your team, the more you're able to get your team involved, the more you create ownership with your team. All right. Now you must all constantly emphasize on accountability, because in a high performance team, you find that is where it makes a big difference. People are self-accountable. All right. They don't need you to make them accountable. When you have a high performance team, if you're familiar with agile, they talk about agile. To make agile work, you need a high performance team. And what it simply means is people hold themselves accountable. When things go wrong, when things are not happening as planned, you don't need to ask them to stay overtime. They'll automatically get the work done. Okay, so that's why it's very, very important to have a high performance team. And last but not least, focus on result. So on that point, maybe one of the things I'd like to leave with you is, I'm sure all of you know the word team is spelled as T-E-A-M. But I'm not sure how many of you actually know that TEM actually stands for Together Everyone Achieve More. All right, TEAM, Together Everyone Achieve More. So smart leader will always know the importance of team. Smart leader will always know how to spend time and develop a good team. Because at the end of the day, they'll be leveraging on the high performance team to deliver, all right, the objectives that they want to achieve. So likelihood, a good leader will not just be a solo, do it all by themselves, but they will try to leverage on the, what they call the strengths of the team member so that you can get synergy. And I suppose many of you know what synergy means. It means 1 + 1 is more than 2. All right. So you can only get synergy when you work with team. So always tell yourself as a leader, as a manager, team is something very essential to you. Team is your asset. All right. So the question then is, how do you convert team, especially virtual team, to work for you? So going back to what I said earlier on, you must learn how to lead yourself first before you talk about leading others. So lead by example, walking the talk is very important, and you yourself have to stay very positive. I'm a strong believer for healthy body, healthy mind. You don't have a healthy body, you don't have a healthy mind, it's almost impossible to lead your team. All right. And the last point here, Ting Wei and Charlene, I suppose you are all Singaporean, right? Are you? Ting Wei, I think you are, right? So you know in Singapore, we talk about the 5 C's. So here we're not talking about the 5 C's, which is very materialistic, things like cash, credit card, car, condo, all right? Okay, so here the 3 C's is talking about as a good leader, these are 3 very important aspects that you want to sort of equip yourself with. Because today when I look behind every good leader, without fail, you'll find that these are 3 very important, maybe I call it skill sets that they really brush up on. One is on being a good communicator. The other one is know how to coordinate among the team. And last but not least is how to encourage team to collaborate, all right, to mutually support one another. All right, so question now is how do we go about doing all this? Okay, so I'll put this PPT model over here. So I want to focus on the first one here first, on people. So as you want to go about leading high performance virtual team, I think we need to learn how to develop some competency first and foremost in leading virtual team. All right. So building trust is very important. Having effective communication with clarity is very important. Okay. We must constantly invest time in connecting with people. You can't be building a trust when you're not connected with people. I suppose all of you understand these basic rules. All right. So building trust will require you to invest some time and effort, okay, in connecting with people. Of course, when you connect with people, you must be genuine, you must be authentic, you must be open, you must be transparent. So trust is something that is built over time. It's not something that falls from the sky. Okay. So you must also appreciate the diversity and try to work with the differences. Remember, I mentioned just now, diversity is something that is good. Of course, you can also look at diversity as something that is bad, but by looking at diversity as something that is bad doesn't help you at all. Because we all understand that the world is getting more and more diverse. So you must learn to start by looking at how to appreciate diversity. So one of the things we always touch on as we conduct the diversity training is to get people to recognize that as you talk about diversity, there's no such thing as good or bad, right or wrong. It is really about appreciating the differences. All right. As we start to recognize and appreciate the differences, then we start to spend our positive energy to look at what are the few ways and means or steps that can make things work better for the team. Okay. And then maintain the work-life balance. Some people are asking me, does that mean that having a work-life balance will mean that we cannot perform? That is a $1 million question, because you know, depending on what you mean by work-life balance. Work-life balance is not always defining as 8 hours work, 8 hours sleep, 8 hours family time. Different people have a different kind of work-life balance. Okay, so at the end of the day, it is really about, to different people, you must understand what motivates them. All I can say is when a person enjoys what they are doing, they will not be talking about work-life balance. When a person are not enjoying what they are doing, they'll start to use work-life balance as excuses or as a justification why they don't want to work. All right. So motivation is going to be something quite important for all of us to consider. Okay. So maybe just a bit of hints about how to build trust, because I think that was one of Rachel's questions. So as I said, trust is earned with little step, but it can be broken instantly. So it takes a lot of effort to build trust, but it can be ruined overnight. So how to build trust? Okay, even in the virtual environment, I'll strongly encourage all of you before the meeting, having some of these small talk, ice breaking. Some people are asking me, Gavin, can we do team building in the virtual environment? I say, why not? Team building doesn't mean you must always go out for bowling, you must go out for karaoke, then it's called team building, right? Even some of this kind of what they call heart-to-heart talk, all right, can be considered as a team building, okay? All right, so be sensitive and manage own and other expectations. A lot of time why there is no trust is because we did not communicate well. We did not set expectation well. We keep a lot of things is what we call assumptions. In fact, assumption is a very dangerous word. Okay, so I rather you sometime be upfront and be transparent. I mean, that's what transparent is. Okay, it is definitely better than keeping things to yourself and expect others to know what you feel or how you think. Okay, so involved team, as I mentioned earlier on, involving team is very important. The more involved team, the more they felt taking ownership and be accountable. Okay, then you must be open in sharing and at the same time show empathy. Now, this thing about open in sharing is a very tricky thing, because a lot of time as you start to be open in sharing, you are at the same time sometimes fearful of what people are going to do with this information you share. And very often when people start to feel fearful, they start to put a wall. They stop sharing. When they stop sharing, you encourage people to second guess. So this basically become we call it a vicious cycle. Okay. So at the end of the day, it's the choice you have to make. So let me maybe pose this question to Ting Wei. Ting Wei, I suppose you have lead team before.
Yes, I have.
Okay. So today, if let's say you are a subordinate, you are going to make a forecast to your boss about a project deadline. And based on experience, based on your understanding of the project, you're actually quite confident, quite comfortable that this project can be completed, let's say by October this year. My question to you then is, what would you tell your boss in terms of the due date, the completion date for this project?
Just be upfront and tell him that I think we can do it by October.
Okay.
But
That's very good. Okay.
inherently, if I know there are risks, I will just present the risks.
Just present the risk. Yeah.
But I'll tell it at face value, but what it is.
So I'm glad to hear the answer, because that is not what a lot of project team members do. When they feel that they can finish in October, they say, to be safe and sorry, I better tell my boss December. I always tell project team members to say that, look, your boss is not stupid. The reason why they are your boss is because they are quite experienced. They sometimes can even sniff and smell whether you telling the truth. And the first time you don't tell the truth, next time when you tell them it's October, they'll probably slash you by 2 months. Isn't that true? So this become a lot of time we call it alignment and alignment and alignment. You see, a lot of time we spend a lot of time in meeting room, but because of lack of trust, we have to second guess one another. So I rather all of you adopt what Ting Wei has mentioned just now. Be upfront about that. Tell your boss how you arrive at that October 10 or October timeline. What are some of the risks that you have considered? What are some of the assumptions you have made? I think by having that kind of open and transparent communication, you're actually fostering the kind of trust, which sometimes people don't see it that way. They are kind of fearful. If they have become too transparent, people will exploit them. People will take advantage of them. So because of that, they are not upfront or they are not forthcoming. And because of that, the lack of trust, and then the whole communication breakdown. So now Ting Wei, if I turn the table around, today, let's say you are the boss. You're managing a project team. This project due date is supposed to be December, end of the year, December 2020. What would you tell your team as the due date for this project?
It's December 2020.
Okay, again, I'm glad to hear the answer. Yeah. That's not what many bosses do. When they know that the due date is December 2020, you know what they tell their team? You guys better get it done by October because they want to keep 2 months in their pocket as a buffer. Why do you think bosses have to do that? A very simple answer is they
Yes.
don't trust their team. Isn't that true? When you don't trust the team will not trust the boss, so it doesn't help anyone at all. So again, my basic philosophy, my basic principle is about OT again, being open and transparent. But that had to start with you, because if you are not open and transparent, forget about getting your team member to be open and transparent. Okay? All right.
But just to add on to that point, I think wearing the hat of the boss, although the deadline is December, but I think it's also to facilitate that openness and transparency, because sometimes the project lead, the project manager may not, or the team members,
Sure.
they may send some risk to their deadline, but they don't
Yes.
say it.
Yes.
So I think it's also about, you know, facilitating as the leader, opening
Right.
that your arms to say, do you need any help?
Yes.
Do you foresee any risks? And then you facilitate the openness from the team.
I fully agree with you. So that's why as a leader, sometimes it's easier said than done. You have to also assess your team members' capabilities and maturity. I must admit that last time when I run project team, I do have some project team member who always like to procrastinate. You know what procrastinate means, right? They always like to wait until the last minute, then they get the job done. Okay, and that is actually sometimes putting a lot of risk to the project. So when you are dealing with team member like this, that's where I think if all of you understand the concept called situational leadership, that's where you might have to tweak your leadership styles a little bit, all right, to make sure that that circumstances is being dealt with or addressed, because otherwise that can create unnecessary risk to your project. Just as sometimes as we start doing this, we are not upfront in our communication, that created a lot of mistrust within the team. So again, I'll still encourage all of you to be open and transparent about how you make decision, how you arrive at certain kind of decision that you have made. Okay, all right. Now this next point is kind of important: willingness to accept bad news, admit mistakes, and take risks. Just last year, I was coaching a senior management team. He was complaining to me to say that he don't understand why the project team always come to the management, the senior management last minute when things are too deep into trouble and they got no time to recover. All right. So the first question I asked this senior manager is, do you like to get bad news? Do you like to hear bad news from your team? In fact, he has a tendency every time people bring bad news to him, he'll shoot the messenger. So of course, in that case, people will not be bring this kind of horrible news to him. And only when it is really beyond their control, then you will come to them. So to really get things work, I think as a manager, we must be also willing to accept bad news. We must be also willing to admit mistake. In fact, for a leader who is able to do that, they will win more trust from the team member. Okay, all right. So I've given you some suggestion on how to build trust. The next point is still about people, because I think some of you also highlighted a challenge in virtual team is about communication. Now, as all of you understand communication, there is a sender and there's a receiver. Today, I think I want to focus more on the receiver side to say that on the receiver end, not only do you want to practice listening, because there are two ways you can receive information. You can either hear information or you can listen to information. To me, listen is a lot better than hear, because listen is hearing with understanding. So in our training, not only we talk about being a good listener, we want to be an active listener. So what are some of the behaviors of an active listener, especially in the virtual environment? All right. You find that the reason why a lot of people do not want to turn on webcam, as I mentioned earlier on, is because they are doing multitasking. Or we're having a meeting, they are doing 5 other things. So if you want your team member to be an active listener, you must also lead by example. LBE here stands for lead by example. So ask yourself, in all these meetings that you conduct, do you be the one that always turn on the webcam? Because you want to ask others to turn on the webcam, you yourself must lead by example. Establish eye contact, show body language. Once you have the webcam, it's a lot easier to do that. As I have meeting with my partners, who is sitting, one in Brussels, one in Istanbul, and one in US, we always make it a point. Whenever we are meeting, we all turn on webcam. We don't want to do multitasking. To me, there is a mutual respect of one another's time. Because if we hide behind a camera that's not turned on, you're doing 5 other things, that meeting, as far as I'm concerned, is not productive. It's not effective. So I noticed in many organizations, in fact, when senior management meet, they actually turn on the webcam. In fact, it is a mid-level and the lower working level, people have a tendency to not turn on the webcam because they claim that they have too many works to do, too much work to do. They have a lot of other activities to attend to. And because of that, that again creates a vicious cycle. Meetings are not effective, and then you have to meet and meet and meet. That's a complete waste of time. Okay. And then as a leader, you must constantly ask questions, provide feedback. Like when you're having a Zoom meeting, chances are some of you might have a lot of questions to ask. So that's why Charlene just now encouraged all of you to use the chat window, to use the Q&A window, because the problem with virtual meeting is very often only two parties talk. For other party to chip in, sometimes they felt there is an interruption. So by all means, use chat, all right? Especially nowadays with all these social media like WhatsApps or WeChat, all right? There's no harm. Sometimes you can even have a separate platform for people to have this kind of what they call sharing of information. To me, that's also a way of building trust, okay? Again, we talk about showing empathy. And I find that for people who are active listener, they seldom justify, they seldom be defensive because they know that by being defensive or constantly justified, it's just going to shut the other party down. Okay. Subsequently, all these things about avoid interruption, these are all the good behaviors of being an active listener. Okay. So actually, there are a lot more suggestions, but if you can just start with focusing on the few things I talk about the people side, I hope you can at least gain some headway in managing virtual team. Okay. And last but not least, one of the techniques I would like to share with you, which is something quite important. In one company, I asked, typically, who is the one that take minutes for the meeting? Here I'm talking about a project meeting. They will say that it's always a project manager. Why? Because he's the one that called for the meeting. Okay. However, I would like to encourage you in the virtual environment. Remember I mentioned just now, it's important to engage team member. So it is perfectly all right to assign different of your team member to be the minutes taker during the meeting. Take turns, all right? And I find that for people to take minutes is not an easy task. They really need to practice active listening. They need to really pay attention to all the conversation. And when you are able to get that kind of roles to be rotated in your team, guess what? You are doing the team building. All right? You're getting people to be more engaged, more participative, take ownership, be committed, not multitasking, and focus on the meeting. And when you are able to start the ball rolling, I think that's where you start to integrate people together.
Gavin, so we're approaching the last 10 minutes of
Yep.
this session.
And
And
two more slides, three more slides. So
yep.
I'll sort of finish it so that at least everyone
Okay.
have a framework of the PPT. So I finished the first P, which is people. So the next one, process, is probably something all of you are quite, I would say, near to your heart, especially in the virtual team. You need to have some of this kind of agreement and understanding in your team every time when you have data, how to present the data. Okay, so it's always good to have some kind of standard format. And because in the virtual environment, more so you need to focus on how to make information visual. We call it visualization of information. So use things like color coding, use traffic light, or use some kind of standard template. Don't have too much of the word. So a picture paints 1,000 words. I think this one everybody knows that. Okay. So the second the last idea I want to give to you on the process side is that because in the virtual environment, communication is always a challenge. So it's very important to practice what we call KISS. Remember this acronym KISS, which stands for keep it short and simple. The more you are able to practice KISS, the better will be the communication. Try to use table, try to use color coding. All right, this can really help in terms of visualization of the data. All right. I'm not sure how many of you know what is a push and pull techniques. What it means is that in the virtual environment, because time is an essence, so you cannot be the one that share too much information. Some information you might want to park somewhere for people to pull the information, but some important information to push into people's hand. Okay, so you need to decide a balance, how to have a balance of push and pull. And time zone, as I mentioned earlier on, can be a disadvantage, but on the other hand, if you know how to turn it to an advantage, as I mentioned to you, we actually, when I was in AT&T, we actually turned time zone to our advantage. We work 8 hours in Asia Pac, we pass on to our European guy to run simulation, and then the European guy finished, they pass it on to the US guy to run another 8 hours. By the time you wake up, the job is done. Okay, so instead of become a disadvantage, actually become a competitive advantage. Okay, because time is the essence in the virtual environment, so I encourage people to report by exception. Those things that everybody knows, don't need to report. Only highlight those things that you want people to know. That's called report by exception. I talk about cadence, all right? And because we are talking about process now, it is also good to have some of this what I call decision-making process or risk management process that is being put in place. So that's why if you look at early on, when we talk about the PPT, this one is about the SOP, Standard Operating Procedure or process. If you have SOP set up, it's a lot easier to get the virtual team to work together, okay? And the last page on my PPT is really this thing about technology. Seriously, there are tons and tons of technology you can leverage upon. So I just want to leave you with a simple 4-box matrix here. I'm not sure you understand what this means, but what it means is in the 2 dimensions about place and time. So when you're same place, same time, you can use things like flip chart, meeting systems or face-to-face meeting, no problem at all. But when you are at the same place but different time zone, all right, then this is where you find that things like emails might work better. You have this kind of suggestion box will help a lot. Sometimes when you have a same time but different place, okay, this is where you might want to leverage on some of these things like having a conference because people are in the different places, they can't be meeting face to face. So today, I think we are looking more into this area whereby we are in a different time and different place. All right, so you have to think of some of these collaboration tools or file sharing. That's why if you look at a lot of software today, including Microsoft Office, all these WebEx or whatever, they have more and more of this kind of collaborative system put in place. They start to leverage on push and pull technology. Okay, all right, so remember this PPT model. Today, unfortunately, we only have 1 hour, so we are not able to go too deep into each of these topics, but I'm going to leave you with my contact. I think Tingwei and Charlie has my contact. So I'll probably keep the next maybe 5-10 minutes for Q&A sessions.
Right. Thanks, Gavin. We have a couple of questions. One is from Mali. In your experience dealing with virtual teams, have you felt the benefit of having a good facilitator or otherwise, or the opposite?
Okay, can you repeat the last part of the question? You are saying that
Have you felt
what about the facilitator?
Have you felt the benefits of having a good facilitator when dealing with virtual teams?
Okay, so I first have to qualify this facilitator. Are we talking about somebody external? Because I suppose when that question was asked, my understanding is that it's like inviting someone as an external facilitator to help to facilitate discussion in the team. Okay, now so if my understanding is correct, then I will say that if you have a luxury of doing that, because
It's
external
internal.
facilitator, it could be internal. In fact, my suggestion is that all of you who host a meeting, who chair a meeting, you must learn yourself to be a facilitator. All right, because external facilitator costs money.
So I think Mali's point is that having good facilitation skills may be pivotal in managing virtual teams or could bring added benefits to managing virtual teams.
So if the question is having good facilitation skill, does it help to sort of gel the team together? My quick answer is yes. That's why more and more, a lot of leaders and managers are required to learn how to facilitate meeting, how to facilitate discussion. Okay, so this is where I think having good facilitation, again, you could be wearing the hat as a leader. A lot of time people always thought leader must be the one that make all the decisions. Actually, that's not true. In fact, a leader is one that learn how to facilitate and to draw the strengths from the people in your team. If you are able to do that, I think that is where, as I said earlier on, it will help you to integrate your team a lot better. So my quick answer is yes, definitely brush up on your facilitation skills. Okay.
So Gavin, you might want to move your slide to the page with your contacts.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's just one more quick question about your preference on softwares. You prefer MS Teams, Zoom, Facebook Room, WebEx, or Google Meetup?
Okay. First, I must qualify. I don't own shares in any of these companies. Okay. So, but if I can speak at least from myself as a trainer and consultant, okay, Microsoft Team to me is really more of a collaborative tool. It is not as good a tool to be used for training. Okay, a lot of people thought that they cannot form breakout rooms, but in fact, that is not true. In Teams, there's a workaround. You can set up channels, which work like a breakout room, but just that it is not so straightforward. You need to fiddle around, or you need to kind of search the Google to find how to do something like this, but it's doable. It is just not as straightforward, let's say, as compared to Zoom. Okay, so if you ask me, at least from my last few years of experience using some of these virtual tools, I must say that I kind of like Zoom compared to other platform. Other platform, I'm sure there are other advantages, like WebEx, for example. Part of the reason why some companies do not want to use Zoom is security. Security issue.
Okay, I really want to take this question from Rachel. So she'd like to follow up. She, as the leader, she's really trying to lead by example, as what you shared, but not everyone is engaging because people are used to, lots of face-to-face contact.
Yes.
So what else can she do? Right.
So this is just maybe a suggestion based on the limited information I have from Rachel. I'm a strong believer that as we lead a team, there's no such thing as everyone in your team are high performance. Just as much we love everyone to be a high performer. So I'm a strong believer for 80-20 rules, meaning to say in your team, likelihood, maybe you have 20% of the people who are, I call it star performer, all right? And maybe the other 70-80% of them are the normal people. Of course, there might be even 5 or 10% of rotten apple. You know what rotten apple means, right? Those people who are not performing, people who are always slack, or people who sometimes have what you call this kind of indifferent mentality. So as a leader, there's a tendency for us to always focus on the rotten apple because we are always worried that these are the people who are going to become like a cancer cells that spread to the team and drag down the whole team performance. So in management training, we sometimes talk about this concept called tipping point. If I assume that your team has 1 or 2 star performers, try to leverage on them. Try to use them as a change agent. Try to recognize them. Try to reward them. And by so doing, you will notice that the other 70-80% of people will sort of come on board on that. Okay. To Rachel, if you have time, feel free to drop me an email. You can talk a bit more on that. But the suggestion here is this: when you have a virtual team, especially when your team member are new, all right, it is quite a common thing that the team will go through this initial phase. We call it the storming phase. All right, that is only natural. So our job as a leader is to find how do we go about integrating them together. And that is where some of this discussion we had earlier on about being empathy, to be an active listener, try to understand where are some of the motivation that your team member need, all right, what are some of the problems or challenges they face with. So go through that stage. And if you are able to manage that stage well, likelihood your team become so-called more independent, okay? And they become more self-managed team. Personally, I'm currently running virtual team all along. And one thing I really like about virtual team is that my team members are more and more independent. So for me as a boss, I don't have to worry too much about that. But that does not come overnight. That took me a while, all right, to get the team member to be so-called self-managed, all right, and self-disciplined. Okay, so don't give up. Important thing is don't give up. Okay, and try to focus on some of the better performance team member of yours and use them as a change agent and use them to be the magnet that attract the rest of them to come on board. And guess what? Those rotten apple will just maybe get obsoleted naturally. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Gavin. I think thanks everyone. We just have a last couple of minutes to close. I think there was one question earlier on about whether the slides can be shared with the attendees via email.
Yeah, I will prepare the PDF file. I'll send it to Tingwei and Charlene. Then you can share with the participants.
Sure.
Or is there another way you want me to do it?
No, I think we can do that. we
Okay.
can
Yeah.
communicate.
I'll also put in
Yeah.
the few pages of the survey result that all of you has chipped in, so that you have the complete package of what has been presented.
Yeah, perfect.
Just to mention, this recording will also be uploaded on YouTube, and we're also on Facebook Live. So if you go to our Facebook page, you can also review recording of today's webinar if you want to revisit some points. So next week, we have another webinar on project management versus product management. So feel free to join us. So to register, please connect with us on our social media pages. Next.
Yeah.
Yep. So here are the social media pages. And you can also contact Ting Wei or Jason, our events and membership chairperson, Mr. Jason Ho. And finally, thank you everyone for participating and engaging with us so actively from the Europe and also from around Singapore, Malaysia, from ASEAN. Thank you very much. We appreciate your survey. So if you can just scan the QR code and give us your feedback, we'll appreciate that very much. And I'll also just put the link in the chat.
And on that note, again, want to thank, as a final closure, thanks Gavin for your time.
Pleasure.
And for sharing from your extensive experience, managing virtual teams, even pre-COVID times. I also like to extend a warm thank you to Chai Lian, my co-host, for putting this together with me. And lastly, thank you all for attending. Have a good night. Stay safe, and do check out your emails for the slides over the next couple of days.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Have a good night.
Kevin. Thank
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye.
Bye-bye.